Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce the Honourable Navdeep Bains, Canada's Minister of Innovation, Science and Economic Development. Minister Bains is also the Member of Parliament for the riding of Mississauga-Malton. His first act since he was appointed minister in 2015 was to restore the long-form census. Since then, Minister Bains has been a strong voice for Canada's business community. He has also made fostering economic growth through innovation a high priority for the Government of Canada. He has led the development of the government's Innovation and Skills Plan, which was the centerpiece of the 2017 federal budget. This plan aims to create new jobs and business opportunities for Canadians by making this country a world-leading centre for innovation. Minister Bains has also spearheaded negotiations among the provinces and territories that led to the Canadian Free Trade Agreement. This ambitious agreement will open up trade within Canada in virtually every sector of the economy. Finally, Minister Bains has been a passionate advocate for diversity and inclusion. He has introduced a bill in Parliament that promotes the advancement of women, cultural minorities, and other underrepresented groups to the highest levels of leadership in corporate Canada. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the Honourable Navdeep Bains.
Well, thank you very, very much for that kind introduction. And thank you, Mark Goldberg and Michael Swen, for your leadership and all that you do in terms of really helping promote the telecommunications sector. And it's great to be here this morning. It just, as I was talking to my team and driving here for this particular summit, I realized it's just slightly outside the boundaries of Mississauga-Malton, the constituency I represent. So, for me, I'm going to say welcome to Mississauga-Malton for those of you who are out of town. And thank you for inviting me to kick off this year's summit. As you know, your sector has been at the forefront of our digital revolution. And merci de votre accueil chaleureux et merci de m'avoir invité. Je suis heureux de participer au lancement de ce sommet. Votre secteur est au centre de la révolution numérique. In fact, Canadians were pioneers, starting with the Communications Research Centre. It established the first international connection to the precursor of the Internet. And who would have predicted then that high-speed Internet would become the backbone of a global and digital economy? Increasingly, the prosperity of Canadians depends on their access to high-quality, high-speed Internet. And affordable wireless and broadband services are no longer luxury. They're luxuries that we should take for granted. They are basic and essential tools for all Canadians. And regardless of where they live, they need this service to do business, learn new skills, and more importantly, build communities. So I'm here today to talk about the strengths of this really critical sector and how we can work together to ensure that Canada remains a global leader in telecom technologies. And I also want to talk about areas where this sector can improve and what those of you in this room can do to help. So, first of all, let me start off by thanking you. Because of your investments, Canada has some of the world's most advanced and efficient telecom networks. Very high-speed Internet is available to more than 3/4 of Canadians. And that's up from 2011, when only 1/4 of Canadians had the service. As well, virtually all Canadians are covered by the latest wireless technologies. And Canada's wireless networks are fast. They rank second among G7 countries for average connection speeds. And Canadian telecom network investments, and this again is a point of pride, exceeded $56 billion between 2011 and 2015. So these high-speed networks enable Canadians to do more online. Whether it's buying and selling, collaborating on work projects, or staying in touch with their kids and grandkids in other parts of the world. These networks turn consumers into producers, observers into participants, and users into innovators. So our government understands that Canadians want three things from their telecom services. Quality. Is the service fast enough to do what I want it to do? Coverage. Is the service available where I want it to be? And lastly, price. Is the service affordable? These three areas are clearly where providers need to compete. And that's why our government is doing our part to promote competition and investment. And the goal is very clear. We want to improve quality, coverage, and price for all Canadians. Notre gouvernement comprend que les Canadiens veulent trois choses de leur service de télécommunications. La qualité. Est-ce que le service est assez rapide pour mes besoins? La couverture. Est-ce que le service est disponible où j'en ai besoin? Et le prix. Est-ce que le service est abordable? Les fournisseurs doivent être concurrentiels dans ces trois domaines. Et notre gouvernement favorise la concurrence et les investissements. Notre but est d'améliorer la qualité et la couverture des services. Nous voulons aussi réduire les prix pour les Canadiens. So to improve quality, we've doubled the amount of spectrum available for next-generation wireless networks. That means Canadians will have access to faster, more reliable networks regardless of traffic loads. And to expand high-speed internet coverage, we recently, in our budget, committed to $500 million for the Connect to Innovate program. This program will build a digital backbone that enables Canadians in rural and remote communities to have access to high-speed internet. Up to 300 communities across Canada will benefit from this program. And I'm delighted to say that Canada's internet service providers have expressed overwhelming support for this program. Connect to Innovate is heavily oversubscribed because of your interest. And that means our government can select the best proposals with the greatest benefit to consumers. And that's great news for Canadians in rural and remote communities. But there's still more to do. For example, too many Canadians still feel like they're being left behind, either because they live in parts of the country where high-speed internet and fast wireless networks are still not available, or because they can't afford to pay for those services. Only about 1 in 4 Canadians in rural communities has access to high-speed internet. But access isn't the only challenge. The bigger barrier is price, which are especially high for low-usage cell phone plans. Subscribers pay more for basic cell phone service in Canada than for similar services in the United States and the United Kingdom. And I, get letters regularly, just like my colleagues do, from Canadians who are concerned that they're not receiving the best possible prices and that they're being priced out of the market. People like the father of 3 who's struggling to keep up with the high cost of his family's cell phone bills, which keeps rising every single year. Low-income Canadians spend a higher share of their household income on cell phones and internet bills than high-income Canadians. So it's not surprising that only 6 out of 10 low-income households in Canada have internet access. And by contrast, virtually all households that earn $125,000 annually have it. The digital divide is unacceptable, and it represents a real barrier to continued prosperity for all Canadians. You know, every child who's unable to do school assignments or download music online is one less consumer of your products and services. And each one of these children is potentially one less software developer for your industry and one less job creator for our country. You know, we need every Canadian to be innovation ready, ready to spot opportunities, imagine possibilities, discover new ideas, start new businesses, and create new jobs. Because all Canadians need access to high-speed internet, regardless of their income level or postal code. Until we bridge this digital divide, Canadians will not reach their full potential. And some of you have taken first steps to address the issue, as mentioned earlier. In particular, I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge Rogers and TELUS, who have introduced a service that charges low-income households $10 a month for basic internet. More providers need to follow their lead, and our government is doing its share. D'autres fournisseurs doivent suivre leur exemple, et notre gouvernement joue son rôle. That is why, in our most recent budget, we propose to invest up to $13 million to facilitate all service providers, that's everyone, to offer these programs to low-income families. In fact, our government would like to see more package options and price points offered to all Canadian families, particularly in the wireless sector. And other countries have benefited from service innovations that support low-cost options for consumers as well. Innovations such as Wi-Fi first applications have created a new low-cost business model in wireless market. And this particular model depends far less on routing signals through commercial wireless networks. Instead, Wi-Fi-based service providers route phone calls and data primarily through Wi-Fi networks. And it only falls back on commercial wireless network when customers are out of Wi-Fi range. South of the border, Republic Wireless offers such a plan for as low as $15 US per month. And this new Wi-Fi first model could benefit Canadian consumers as well, especially those with low incomes who are not well served by existing plans. So, ladies and gentlemen, middle-class Canadians and those working hard to join them are concerned about the rising cost of their internet and cell phone bills. And I've mentioned this. I've heard this from constituents and Canadians from across the country. They deserve more affordable options. They deserve more options and choice. That's why our government is taking action. And to that end, I am directing our National Telecommunications Regulator to reconsider one of its recent decisions and launch a new proceeding. On March the 1st, the CRTC issued rules for regulated wholesale roaming by wireless providers. And this decision excludes Wi-Fi-based providers from access to regulated roaming services. And that effectively prevents Wi-Fi-based providers from offering their low-cost plans to consumers. And this lack of choice does not benefit Canadians. And for this reason, I am directing the CRTC to rethink its decision and reconsider the Wi-Fi first model. And this model could provide Canadians with more choice and affordable prices. As the CRTC looks at this model, I will also ask you to maintain a strong investment environment that supports, and I want to be clear about this, that supports facility-based competition. That's how Canadians will benefit from faster, more reliable services across the country. But that's not all. Fees that providers charge to unlock cell phones are a major irritant for consumers as well. And this is an issue, again, that I've heard directly from Canadians. You know, last year, Canadians paid nearly $38 million to have their phones unlocked. And I know that the CRTC is looking at this issue, and our government will closely monitor the results of the CRTC's review. And we will continue to do everything possible to promote more competition and choice for consumers. And to that end, I'm pleased to announce today that our government has made changes to its licensing process for satellite-based providers of high-speed internet. You know, this action will encourage these next-generation providers to enter the market. And that's good news for Canadians living in rural and remote communities, because new low Earth orbit satellites have the potential to revolutionize the delivery of rural broadband. And our government will continue to manage spectrum in ways that benefit all Canadians, because the goal is to improve the quality and capacity of our wireless networks, especially since Canadians have a never-ending love affair with these wireless devices. Trust me, ask my 2 daughters. Which has triggered an explosion in demand for more data and faster networks. And demand is also surging as advanced devices merge with network sensors and software, which is ushering in the age of connected cars and the Internet of Things. And again, that is why our government is making low-frequency spectrum in the 600 megahertz band available for wireless service providers. You know, the 600 band will improve the quality and range of wireless coverage for Canadians. And in particular, it will extend more wireless signals to Canadians living in rural and remote communities. And let me be clear about our approach to the 600 megahertz auction. It will provide an opportunity to support more competition, lower prices, and encourage investment. But that's not all. For Canada to be a world leader in innovation, our country needs to develop and use emerging technologies, such as 5G wireless networks. You know, the 5G market is expected to be worth $36 billion globally by 2020, and Canada must be ready to compete. 5G would allow Canada to become a global leader in emerging technologies, such as connected cars and smart cities, both initiatives that this government supports. And that's why I am pleased to launch a public consultation on releasing spectrum to support the development and deployment of 5G mobile networks. That's how Canadians will have access to faster, more reliable networks, regardless of traffic loads. So, ladies and gentlemen, there is no difference anymore between the digital economy and the rest of the economy. The digital economy is the economy. And for that reason, our government is taking steps to reflect Canada's digital economy. And we will review the Telecom and Broadcasting Acts as we announced in the most recent budget. These 2 acts were written before the Internet became an ever-present part of our lives. And these acts need to be examined through the lens of current and future trends of technology. But above all, we must respond to the changing needs and expectations that Canadians have. The Minister of Canadian Heritage and I will work together to review both of these acts. And the goal is to position Canada to be a global leader in the digital economy. That's how we will create better jobs and better business opportunities for all Canadians. And that's how we'll encourage more Canadians to be developers of content and content creators for the internet. And our government looks forward to co-investing with you in the digital future. Nous allons encourager plus de Canadiens à créer du contenu pour Internet. Notre gouvernement veut investir avec vous pour bâtir notre avenir numérique. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Thank you kindly.
Well, I guess while all of the media is looking up, that was decision CRTC 2017-56 for those of you who are trying to figure out what exactly was said on March 1st. And so while the media is focusing on that and going, wow, when was the last time the government chose to review a decision of its own motion? That's one for you to be looking up. We'll let the trivia guys, I guess, work on that one. I want to focus on my pet project first, the low-income broadband.
Yep.
And I know one of the biggest challenges for the service providers has been in identifying who qualifies for these programs. And my understanding is that the $13 million is to help develop a tool.
That's right.
Do we know any kind of, or have any information on a timetable for when that might be available?
So you're absolutely right. I mean, for us and in my remarks today, it really is a major issue that we hear from consumers, particularly in the low income bracket between 18,000 to 30,000. There's so many individuals across the country, as I mentioned in my remarks, 1/3 that have no subscriptions. This is a real challenge. I mean, if you think about it, education is a great equalizer in our society. Doesn't matter where you live, where you come from, what's your postal code. You know, that's an opportunity for you to be able to reach your full potential. And in this new digital economy, to have individuals with low income not having the ability to have access to the internet is a massive disadvantage. You know, it's a massive disadvantage if you're in rural and remote communities, and obviously if you are a part of urban centers. So this is a socioeconomic issue. And you know, when we say we want to strengthen the middle class and those working hard to join it, we mean it. And this particular initiative, this $13 million, you're right, there's different initiatives that will be put in place. It's about working with providers like TELUS and Rogers, as you highlighted, to see how we can provide data and other means to be able to address that issue and provide low usage plans for these households that have no subscription. So this is obviously something we're working on and will unveil in the coming weeks.
Well, and among the learnings that I think both TELUS and Rogers have found is that a lot of those same households that don't have an internet connection don't even have a computer. And as you said, it's hard to imagine how a kid can even try to do homework without having a connected computer at home. And I know Shauna McCaffrey's here from the Computers for Schools program.
Yeah. Hello. Well, I also, it's not only, obviously it's a challenge, as you said, the computer, but it's a matter of life and death for some of these kids in our rural and remote communities, particularly when it comes to our Indigenous people. Imagine these young kids, idle hands, not having access to a computer or to the internet in this, you know, in 2017. So this is a real serious issue for us. That's why we also introduced the Connect to Innovate program. And this is again about providing more broad coverage. And the objective is really to leverage private sector investments, and we've seen that. Oversubscription, many of the telecoms have stepped up, so I want to thank them for that. And the objective is to make sure that we have fiber to the institutes as a backbone to deal with some of these challenges also in some of our rural and remote communities and our most vulnerable young people, those indigenous kids.
So how do we encourage additional service providers to get on board? In the US, I remember it was a condition of approval for Comcast's acquisition of NBC. Is it something that you've contemplated in terms of incentives or making it conditions on acquisitions, mergers?
Well, I think today the decision, the CRTC decision that we're referring back clearly demonstrates our desire to look at a Wi-Fi first model, to really look at low usage plans. As you saw from the graphs, we pay much more relative to our US and UK peers, frankly, compared to our G7 peers as well. So that's one illustration of how we want to go back and look at that in a more broad, comprehensive way to see, can we provide a solution, as I mentioned, the US example of $15 a month, and where we can use Wi-Fi first model to be able to do that. And again, we support a facilities-based competition, and we think that's important, but we think this particular initiative will help deal with some of those low usage plans.
So there's an interesting tension between driving down prices and continuing to get those great levels of investment.
You're absolutely right.
Because
well, that's what it is. Right now, we're really strong, and that's why I went out of my way to applaud and thank the telecommunications sector. From 2011 to 2015, $56 billion worth of investment. So that's significant. And again, relative to our G7 peers, we're at the top. And those graphs that I had in my remarks illustrate that. But at the same time, prices are really high. And, middle-class Canadians are struggling. They're dealing with rising costs. I gave the example of a father with 3 kids. I've got 2 young girls as well. So as a household, that's a lot of pressure. And what we're trying to do is create a little bit of tension in the system where we want to maintain, investments, but also see more affordable prices. It's really about saying, look, how can we, and I mentioned that today with the 5G consultations, with the Wi-Fi first model, with the streamlining of the process for the low Earth orbit satellites. All of this is to say, how can we enable technology to create more competition, which will increase investments? And the objective is to have faster networks, better coverage, and affordable prices. And so that's what we're trying to achieve through these specific measures that I highlighted this morning.
Interesting. So among the other things that you talked about was the review of the Broadcast and Telecom Acts. I think I've probably written more than once that back in 2006, the Telecom Policy Review Panel, which was an interesting creature of it was created by a Liberal government, delivered its report to a Conservative government by the time the report came out. They had recommended every 5 years doing a refresh. So that was 2006, we're 11 years later. Do you contemplate striking a panel similar to that to conduct this, this review of the 2 acts?
So you're right. I mean, if 2006 and even prior to that, and I think the last major review was done in 1993. And so it's been a long time, really before the internet became prevalent in society. So with the issues around content and the issues around technology, as I highlighted, we really need to look at the Telecommunication Act. We really need to examine the Broadcasting Act through that lens. And so we'll be providing a detailed plan of how those consultations will unfold and how we want to proceed. And so we'll definitely engage the industry in that process. And the idea and the focus for me is how can we really focus on enabling technology to promote more competition, more investment, so we can, again, really deal with the issues around quality, coverage, and affordability.
And something of a more pressing concern is the 3-year review of the anti-spam law, which is coming up. We're about to enter the next phase.
Correct.
And is there any information you can give us on that?
So as you know, we're right now really engaged in consulting industry. It's really about protecting consumers. That is our objective. Even today, as you can see, I got a very strong consumer message. This is really dealing with the angst and the concerns with consumers. And we'll be making an announcement very shortly on that as well.
Okay. I don't see anyone at the microphones, so...
I believe someone is arriving.
Here we go. We've got time for one.
Oh, great. Thanks very much. Mr. Minister, thank you very much for being here. My name is George Berger, and I'm with V Media, which provides TV, internet, and home phone services, mostly across Canada at this point. But we were actually involved in providing TV in connection with one of your initiatives, and I really want to commend you and your staff for what you're really accomplishing, because we've seen hands-on how important the initiative is, particularly for First Nations communities. We partnered with a company called First Telecommunications, which is owned by the Wikwemikong Unceded Reserve.
Correct.
And it's incredible to see them take charge of their own telecom and TV needs, driven by the seed capital that you were able to provide. It's transformational, and I really encourage you to drive very, very hard further to make sure that these communities have the ability to take control of their own telecom and television needs, not just for the important thing that you mentioned about being connected educationally and health-wise, but also cost. Because the cost that these people are currently paying for this pastiche of services from a variety of sources is astronomical relative to their incomes. And by being able to take charge of their own needs, they've driven those costs down dramatically, and it's going to contribute immeasurably to their quality of life. So thank you.
No, thank you very much for that intervention, and you're absolutely right. It really is, our focus is, and as you can see from my remarks today, it's really about lower prices and more choices, particularly for those that are the most vulnerable, dealing with other cost pressures. And I do want to acknowledge my Deputy Minister, John Nubley, and my Associate Deputy Minister, Kelly Gillis. I know you mentioned the team, so I do want to acknowledge them as well. They've done a tremendous job in this area, and if you have any tough questions, feel free to ask them afterwards as well.
Thank you very much.
We're going to send George a bill for that advertising time.
Thank you very much.
Minister, I want to thank you for joining us. It's really quite a kickoff to this year's summit. I imagine there'll be a couple news articles about your speech this morning, and thank you for joining us
Well, I
this year.
appreciate it. It's not about news articles. It's really about making sure that we help those in the middle class, and the issue around affordability was a priority, and I wanted to articulate that this morning, so thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you.
We haven't